I never thought I'd be the person who would have to look a 10-year-old child in the eyes and tell him that his reign of terror ended today. Nor did I think I'd be the one standing in a dark hallway holding a bucket of cold water, while a billionaire's son screamed that he would have me arrested. But when I saw that little monster standing over his crying younger sister, laughing while he shredded her favorite stuffed animal, the only thing she had left from their late grandmother, something in me just snapped. I didn't care about the paycheck anymore, and I certainly didn't care about his father's influence. I looked at that boy, a child who had managed to fire 6 babysitters in 2 months by framing them for theft or accusing them of physical abuse, and I realized that if someone didn't step in now, he was going to grow up to be a genuine menace to society. Was I wrong for what I did? Did I cross the line from being a strict babysitter to something much darker just to teach him a lesson he'd never forget? I want you to listen to every single detail of how this night unfolded, and tell me if you would have stayed as calm as I did, or if you would have walked out and left that family to rot. This wasn't just babysitting. This was a psychological war, and I was determined to be the last one standing. The story really starts about 3 weeks ago when I was hired by the Sterling family. Mr. Sterling is a high-powered corporate lawyer who is never home, and Mrs. Sterling is a socialite who spends most of her time at charity events that are really just excuses to drink wine with her friends. They have 2 kids, Sophie, a sweet 6-year-old who is practically invisible in that house, and Leo. Leo is 10 going on 40. He's brilliant, manipulative, and has been given everything he ever asked for since the moment he could point at a toy. The problem is Leo doesn't want toys anymore. He wants power. The previous babysitters told stories that sounded like they were from a horror movie. One girl said Leo hid her car keys, and then called the police to report a suspicious vehicle blocking their driveway. Another said he recorded her having a private phone conversation about her financial struggles, and played it on the living room speakers while his parents were hosting a dinner party. He didn't just misbehave, he destroyed lives for sport. When I walked into that mansion for my first day, I wasn't the typical college student they usually hired. I'm a 30-year-old former military drill instructor who is currently finishing a degree in child psychology. I needed the money, sure, but I also have a very low tolerance for disrespect. Mr. Sterling looked at me with exhaustion in his eyes and said, "Leo is spirited. Just keep him alive until we get back from our trip to Dubai. If you survive the week, there's a $5,000 bonus in it for you." That should have been my first red flag. A $5,000 bonus for 1 week of babysitting? That's not a job. That's hazard pay. I spent my first hour in the house just observing. The atmosphere was thick with a toxic mix of neglect and overindulgence. The walls were covered in original art that Leo had smeared chocolate on, and the maids looked like they were walking on eggshells. I watched Leo interact with one of the cleaning staff. He literally tripped her as she carried a tray of laundry, and then laughed when she fell, calling her clumsy and replaceable. I didn't intervene yet. I needed to see the full extent of his pathology. I noticed how Sophie would hover in the corners of rooms, clutching her teddy bear, watching her brother with a look of pure, unadulterated fear. It wasn't just sibling rivalry, it was a victim living with a predator. The first 3 days were a test of wills. Leo tried the usual tricks. He refused to eat the dinner I made, throwing the plate across the room and telling me I was nothing but a glorified maid. I didn't yell. I didn't react. I simply picked up the broken ceramic, cleaned the floor, and told him that since he didn't want dinner, he wouldn't be eating until breakfast. He laughed in my face, thinking he'd just sneak down to the pantry later. What he didn't realize was that I had already moved all the snacks to a locked cabinet in my room. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard him creeping down the stairs. I was sitting in the dark kitchen waiting. When he opened the pantry and found it empty, he let out a frustrated growl. I turned on the light, and he jumped nearly a foot in the air. "Hungry, Leo?" I asked calmly. He narrowed his eyes and hissed, "I'll tell my dad you're starving me. He'll have you fired by morning." I just smiled and said, "Go ahead. But until then, you're on my schedule. And my schedule says bedtime was 4 hours ago." He tried to push past me, but I didn't budge. I'm 6'2" and weigh 200 pounds of solid muscle. He was a skinny 10-year-old. He realized he couldn't bully me physically, so he switched tactics. He started being good. He was quiet, he did his homework, and he even helped Sophie with her drawings. But I knew better. I've seen this look in the eyes of recruits who are planning a mutiny. He was watching me, learning my routine, looking for a weakness. He began asking me personal questions, trying to find a soft spot. "Where's your family?" he'd ask with a fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Why are you just a babysitter if you're so smart?" He was looking for leverage, something he could use to humiliate me later. On Wednesday, he tried to bribe me. He pulled out a wad of $100 bills he'd clearly swiped from his father's desk. "Just let me play my computer all night and tell my parents I was an angel. And this is yours," he whispered. I didn't even look at the money. I told him he had 10 seconds to put it back exactly where he found it, or I would call his father right then and there. He realized I couldn't be bought, and that's when his good boy facade started to crack. He began leaving surprises for me, a thumbtack in my sneaker, salt in my coffee, and once he even smeared honey on the door handle of my bedroom so I'd get stuck. Each time, I greeted the prank with a terrifying level of silence. I didn't scold him. I just made him clean it up. The thumbtack? I made him inspect every shoe in the house for safety hazards. The salt? I made him brew and pour 20 cups of coffee down the drain to practice his aim. He was getting frustrated because his psychological warfare wasn't working on a man who had been yelled at by colonels for 6 years. The turning point happened on Thursday. I was in the backyard playing tag with Sophie, who was finally starting to come out of her shell, when I heard a crash from upstairs. I ran inside to find Leo in the master bedroom. He had gone into his mother's jewelry box and was holding a diamond necklace worth more than my entire life's earnings. He looked at me with a wicked grin and said, "I wonder what happens if I drop this down the garbage disposal and tell Dad I saw you in here earlier?" He was testing the false accusation card that had worked on all the others. I didn't panic. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. "Leo, do you see this app? It's connected to the hidden cameras I installed, with your father's written permission, in all the common areas and the hallways. If that necklace goes missing, the police won't be looking at me. They'll be looking at the footage of you stealing it." His face went pale. He dropped the necklace back into the box and stormed out, screaming that he hated me. But that wasn't the end. That night, while I was downstairs making a final round of the house, I heard Sophie sobbing. I rushed to her room and saw the scene I described earlier. Leo had taken her Nana bear, a worn-out teddy bear that Sophie slept with every night, and he had used a pair of kitchen shears to cut it into tiny pieces. Sophie was hyperventilating, her little heart breaking, and Leo was just standing there looking bored. "She was being annoying," he said simply. "And you like her more than me, so she had to be punished." That was the moment the strict babysitter became the world's strictest babysitter. I didn't raise my voice. I took Sophie to my room, locked the door, and told her she was safe. Then I went back to Leo. He was lying on his bed, playing on his iPad as if nothing had happened. I walked in, grabbed the iPad, and snapped it over my knee. The look of pure shock on his face was almost satisfying. "You can't do that," he screamed. "That's mine." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Nothing in this house is yours anymore, Leo. You've lost the privilege of being a child because you don't know how to be a human being. From this moment on, you are in my version of boot camp. And trust me, you are not going to like the training." I spent the next 6 hours clearing his room. I took his TV, his computer, his expensive sneakers, his designer clothes, and even his bed frame. By 4 a.m., his room was nothing but a mattress on the floor and a single set of plain gray sweats. He was crying, actually crying, but not out of sadness, out of rage. He tried to hit me, and I simply caught his arm and guided him back to his mattress. "Sleep," I said. "We start at 6 a.m. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the hallway outside his door, not out of cruelty, but because I knew he might try to hurt himself or the house just to spite me. I stayed awake, drinking black coffee, reflecting on the psychological profile of this child. He wasn't born evil, he was manufactured. He was the product of parents who replaced affection with bank transfers and discipline with silence. He had learned that the only way to get attention was to be a monster. Well, he was about to get all the attention he could handle, but it wasn't the kind he wanted. I started drafting a rigorous schedule. Every hour was accounted for. physical labor, reflection, and social observation. I knew that for a kid like Leo, the greatest punishment wasn't physical. It was the removal of his perceived superiority. I was going to make him feel like a regular human being, subject to the same rules as everyone else, for the first time in his life. So that's the situation I was in. I had stripped a billionaire's son of every luxury he possessed after he traumatized his sister. And I was about to spend the next 48 hours breaking down his ego to build up a conscience. I knew the parents would be back soon, and I knew I was risking a lawsuit or worse. Before I tell you what happened next, and the extreme lesson I taught him that finally broke his spirit, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have called the parents and quit? Or would you have done exactly what I did to protect Sophie and teach Leo a lesson? Let me know, because things are about to get much more intense. The next morning, the boot camp began. At exactly 6 a.m., I walked into Leo's room with a whistle and a bucket of ice water. He didn't get up, so he got the water. He screamed, jumping up and shivering, calling me every name in the book. I didn't care. I handed him a mop and told him he had 30 minutes to clean the hallway, the stairs, and the kitchen. If he stopped, he didn't get breakfast. He tried to refuse, sitting on the floor in a silent protest. I sat in a chair across from him and read a book. An hour passed. Then 2. Around 9 a.m., his stomach started growling. "I'm hungry," he whimpered. "The mop is right there," I replied without looking up. It took him until noon to realize I wasn't joking. He mopped that floor with tears streaming down his face. When he finished, I gave him a bowl of plain oatmeal and a glass of water. No sugar, no frutti, no juice. He hated it, but he ate every bite. For the rest of the day, I made him sit in the living room and watch Sophie. He wasn't allowed to speak to her or touch her toys. He had to watch her play, watch her be happy, and see the consequences of his actions. Every time he tried to sneer or make a comment, I added another chore to his list. By Saturday night, he was exhausted. He had cleaned the entire house, organized the garage, and hand-washed Sophie's remaining stuffed animals. I didn't stop there. I made him write an essay on the value of other people's feelings. He tried to write gibberish at first, but I made him rewrite it 3 times until it actually made sense. I saw his hands shaking with fatigue, but I didn't back down. I needed him to understand that his actions had weight. On Saturday evening, I did something even more psychological. I sat him down and showed him the cost of all the items he had destroyed over the last year. The electronics, the clothes, the furniture. I showed him how many hours a normal person would have to work to afford those things. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe not quite empathy yet, but a realization of the magnitude of his wastefulness. We spent hours going through the family's security footage from the past year. I made him watch himself. I made him watch the way he looked when he was being cruel. "Do you like that person, Leo?" I asked. He didn't answer, but for the first time he didn't look away from the screen. He saw the tears on the faces of the staff he'd bullied. He saw the way Sophie would flinch when he entered a room. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating even. He tried to maintain his tough guy posture, but I could see his lip trembling. I told him that respect isn't something you're born with because of your last name. It's something you earn by the way you treat the person who has the least to offer you. Sunday morning was the ultimate test. I told him his job was to prepare a formal breakfast for Sophie. He had to serve her, wait on her, and ensure she was happy. This was a kid who had never even poured his own cereal. He struggled with the eggs, he burned the toast, and he nearly dropped the orange juice twice. But he did it. And when Sophie looked up at him with a cautious, tiny smile and whispered, "Thank you, Leo," I saw something break inside him. Not a bad break, but the shattering of a shell. He didn't know how to handle kindness because he had never traded in it. The climax came on Sunday afternoon, hours before the parents were due back. Leo had been strangely quiet all day. I thought I had finally reached him, but he had one last move, a desperate attempt to regain control. He had managed to get a hold of a backup phone his mother kept in her office, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. He called 911. He told the operator that his babysitter was holding him hostage, had beaten him, and was destroying the house. Within 15 minutes, 3 police cruisers were screaming up the driveway, tires screeching on the gravel. My heart dropped. This was it. This was how he won. I made him watch himself. I made him watch the way he looked when he was being cruel. Do you like that person, Leo? I asked. He didn't answer, but for the first time he didn't look away from the screen. He saw the tears on the faces of the staff he'd bullied. He saw the way Sophie would flinch when he entered a room. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating even. He tried to maintain his tough guy posture, but I could see his lip trembling. I told him that respect isn't something you're born with because of your last name. It's something you earn by the way you treat the person who has the least to offer you. Sunday morning was the ultimate test. I told him his job was to prepare a formal breakfast for Sophie. He had to serve her, wait on her, and ensure she was happy. This was a kid who had never even poured his own cereal. He struggled with the eggs, he burned the toast, and he nearly dropped the orange juice twice. But he did it. And when Sophie looked up at him with a cautious, tiny smile and whispered, "Thank you, Leo," I saw something break inside him. Not a bad break, but the shattering of a shell. He didn't know how to handle kindness because he had never traded in it. The climax came on Sunday afternoon, hours before the parents were due back. Leo had been strangely quiet all day. I thought I had finally reached him, but he had one last move, a desperate attempt to regain control. He had managed to get a hold of a backup phone his mother kept in her office, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. He called 911. He told the operator that his babysitter was holding him hostage, had beaten him, and was destroying the house. Within 15 minutes, 3 police cruisers were screaming up the driveway, tires screeching on the gravel. My heart dropped. This was it. This was how he won. The officers burst into the house, guns drawn, shouting for everyone to put their hands up. I stayed calm, kept my hands visible, and told them exactly where the children were. Leo came running down the stairs, sobbing hysterically, pointing at me and yelling. He hit me. Look at my room. He took everything. Please help me. He's crazy. The officers looked at me, then at the bare room, then at the bruised ego of this kid. One officer started to reach for his handcuffs, his face grim. I simply said, "Officer, before you do that, please check the nanny cam footage from the last 48 hours. And then please look at the recording on my phone from 10 minutes ago." I had anticipated this. I knew he'd try a final nuclear option. I played the video I had recorded from the hallway. It showed Leo sitting calmly on the floor, holding his mother's phone, practicing his crying voice before dialing 911. He was literally laughing to himself, saying, "Enjoy jail, loser. No one tells me what to do." Then, I showed them the footage of him destroying Sophie's bear. The officers watched in stunned silence. They weren't looking at a victim. They were looking at a sociopath in training. One of the officers, a father himself, looked at Leo with such disappointment that the boy actually flinched. The officer turned to me and said, "You're doing a hell of a job, son. Most people would have quit on day one." They didn't arrest me. Instead, they sat Leo down and gave him a very stern lecture about the legal consequences of filing a false police report, and how, if he were just a few years older, he'd be heading to a juvenile detention center that night. They stayed for an hour, explaining to him that his family's money wouldn't protect him from the law once he turned 18. I saw the fear in his eyes then, real fear, the kind that comes from realizing you aren't invincible. The officer told him, "Your parents might buy you toys, but the state of New York won't buy your lies. You keep this up, and your next boot camp will have bars on the windows." When the police left, Leo didn't scream or throw things. He didn't even try to argue. He just went back to his room and sat on his mattress, staring at the floor. He sat there for 3 hours in total silence. I didn't disturb him. He needed to sit with the weight of what he'd almost done. He'd almost sent an innocent man to prison just to win an argument. When Mr. and Mrs. Sterling finally arrived home, the house was spotless. Sophie was happy, and Leo was sitting at the dining table, silently writing a 10-page apology letter to his sister. I sat the parents down and showed them everything. The destroyed bear, the 911 call, and the boot camp I had run. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them their son was on a path to either a prison cell or a very lonely, miserable life. I played the 911 recording for them. Mrs. Sterling started to cry, realizing how far gone her son had been, and Mr. Sterling just sat there in shock, his face turning a deep shade of purple. He looked at the footage of the police in his house and realized how close his son had come to ruining a man's life just for a prank. He handed me the $5,000 bonus, plus an extra $2,000. He asked if I could stay on permanently, offering me a salary that would have paid off my student loans in 6 months. I declined. I told them that Leo didn't need a babysitter. He needed parents who were actually present and a therapist who could help him deal with his anger. I told them that if they didn't change their parenting style immediately, no amount of money or strict babysitters would save their family. I told them that the next time, he might not target a babysitter. He might target them. I left that house feeling like I had won a war, but also feeling a deep sadness for those kids. Leo actually walked me to the door. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't yell either. He just looked at me and asked, "Are you coming back?" I told him, "Only if I hear you've been a brother to Sophie. If not, I still have the bucket and the ice water." He actually gave a small, shaky nod. It was the first time I had seen him look like a normal 10-year-old boy instead of a miniature tyrant. Months later, I heard through my friend that Leo was actually doing better. The Sterlings had put him in intensive therapy and started spending weekends together as a family. They actually fired their social calendar and started attending Sophie's recitals and Leo's games. Sophie was doing great in school, and Leo hadn't been kicked out of his new academy. He even sent me a picture of a new bear he'd bought for Sophie with his own allowance money. Money he earned by doing chores, not by just existing. He wrote a small note on the back. "I haven't needed the bucket yet." In the end, I think Leo learned that the world doesn't belong to him, and that his actions have real, painful consequences. It's a hard lesson to learn at 10, but it's better than learning it in a prison cell at 20.